After watching Wednesday for the second time, the feeling that I had the first go round was cemented. I need that sweater vest. The knitted one, not the crocheted one, because I don't know how to crochet. Because the vest is no longer available to purchase, I took matters into my own hands and I present to you a mostly accurate baseline formula for knitting your own. Let's talk about construction. Starting with the checkered portion, I knitted this vest from the bottom up, one column at a time, sewed all of the columns together, and then picked up stitches for all of the ribbing. I did it this way because it made the design process faster for when I would inevitably have to frog some of it, and also color work scares me. That being said, if color work does not scare you, I recommend starting at the very bottom with the ribbing and working in the round from the bottom up until you split at the arms for the front and back. Because the checkered portion is as wide as it is long, I chose a length, divisible by 4, that complemented my body type in both directions. I settled on 20 inches long, which gave me 5 by 5 inch squares. The yarn that I'm working with is just Hobby Lobby brand Yarn Bee Soft Stitch in black and white. This is about a worsted weight yarn. I made a swatch to determine the stitch and row count that gave me 5 inches square, and that came out to be 28 stitches by 32 rows. For your project, if you want a different size sweater, I recommend choosing an overall length, dividing that by 4, and creating a swatch to determine your individual square size. I will also give proportion recommendations in addition to my stitch count so that you can scale your sweater vest. Last bit of housekeeping, if you're using my method, after finishing one square of color, I added in the new color, knitted until the end of the row to secure it, tied the two tails together, and then knitted and purled like normal. With all that being said, let's start knitting. Starting with the back in column 1, use the long tail cast on method to cast on 28 stitches, or however many you need to meet gauge, and then purl a row. Then, knit the knit row and purl the purl row for an additional 32 rows. For the next color, knit the knit row and purl the purl row for 32 rows. These two squares will be the same for all columns, so I'll just refer to these as square 1 and square 2 patterns. Adding in the next color, this starts the sleeve section, so knit 1 row, purl 1 row, knit the next row until 3 stitches remain, slip slip knit the 2 stitches together, and then knit the last stitch. Purl the next row and then repeat the pattern of decreasing on the knit row until 19 stitches, or about 2/3 of your original stitch count, remain. From there, knit and purl like normal until you reach 32 rows. Adding in the next color, knit and purl 19 stitches for 32 rows, and then bind off the 19 stitches. For column 2, start with square 1 and square 2 patterns, just with opposite colors. For the third square, switch colors and repeat the pattern for square 2. For the last square, I really wanted to achieve the curved neckline that her sweater vest seems to have, so knit the knit row and purl the purl row for 22 rows. On the 23rd row, bind off 4, knit until the end of the row, and then flip your work and purl 1 row. Repeat this process of binding off 4 stitches on the knit row until you have 12 stitches remaining. From there, knit and purl until you reach 32 rows. This is what that looks like when you're done. It's a little funky, but if you pick up the neckline stitches with enough pizzazz, it'll look great. Columns 3 and 4 are just the mirror images of columns 1 and 2. For column 3, note that the 4-stitch bind-offs happen on the purl side, and for column 4, the decrease method is now knit 2 together. If you aren't following my exact stitch count, just keep in mind that the number of stitches you bind off for each column need to match the number of stitches you bind off on the corresponding front columns. Moving on to the front, columns 1 and 4 are the exact same as the back, so starting with column 2, follow the square 1 and square 2 patterns. Then, to start the decreases for the V-neck, my goal was to continually decrease throughout both squares like her vest seems to. To achieve this, knit 1 row, purl 1 row, and then start decreasing on every other knit row. The pattern looks like this. For square 3, I decreased a total of 8 times, started square 4 with 20 stitches, and then decreased 8 more times before binding off 12. Column 3 is the mirror image of this, just using SSK instead. For all of the vertical seaming, I used mattress stitch, which should actually be called magic stitch because this is beautiful. You can't even tell that it was 2 separate pieces. After all of the vertical pieces were sewn, I attached the shoulders for the front and back panels using a back stitch. I picked up stitches along the bottom edge using 4mm circular needles and ended up with 208 stitches and started the 2x2 ribbing. The number of stitches needs to be divisible by 4 in order to do this type of ribbing. So if you pick up a number that is not divisible by 4, just knit 2 together or purl 2 together at one or both sides until you get to a divisible number. That pattern could look something like this. I wore my hair like this for about 3 days straight in order to film a short video of the process, and it made me think, would Wednesday actually make her own clothing? Let me know what you think. I bound off all of the stitches after about 2.5 inches of ribbing. For the sleeves, I picked up 128 stitches each and worked in 2x2 ribbing for 13 rows because that just felt appropriate. For the bind off, however, I used my smallest needle of 3.5 millimeters to try and avoid that flare that you usually get when binding off ribbing. And finally, for the neckline, I picked up one color at a time, which ended up being 89 stitches for white and 88 stitches for black, and then worked in 2x2 ribbing. The uneven number didn't matter because the front V will hide it. I just made sure that the back 2 stitches per color were knit stitches so that I could sew them together using mattress stitch. And for the front V, I turned the sweater inside out and used back stitch like this. Lastly, weave in all your loose ends, or don't, and you should have a Wednesday checkerboard sweater vest.